Welcome, everybody. We are about to get started. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to session 1 of HackMyPhD. I am here to provide technical support. Our moderators this evening are David Waterman and Ankit Kumar, who are here to give you a little bit of an overview of this evening's proceedings. And Ankit, if you would like to kick off, it is now 5 o'clock and we have 86 folks here in attendance. Welcome, everyone. Ankit, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So I can hear some background noise, actually.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If everybody who is not currently speaking, even on the panel, could mute themselves, it might be a little easier for audio.
Yes. Okay. So hello, everyone. Good evening from Waltham. I'm Ankit Kumar. I'm a second-year MBA student at Brandeis University, and I work in the Brandeis Innovation Lab. And we, as a team, welcome you to our first Hack My PhD session. Now, my housemate is a PhD student, and she defines PhD as permanent head damage. I know that's kind of true and funny, but the actual definition of PhD, from what we know, is patiently hoping for the degree, isn't it? Yes, and looking at the current situation, the full form of PhD should be please hire desperate. That's why we are all gathered here to understand how your PhD skills can help you thrive in an economic downturn. Now let me set some ground rules. No one is going to turn their mics on, obviously. And there are two boxes. One is for the questions, and other one is for the chat. So please use that mindfully. Post questions in the questions box and chat in the chat box. Now, firstly, I would like to call upon the stage Rebecca, who is an associate provost for innovation at Brandeis University. Rebecca, the stage is all yours.
I got to unmute myself. So welcome everyone to our 4th annual event of Hack My PhD. One may question why we call it Hack My PhD. Everybody's having hack events, and I figured PhDs should enjoy the fun too. And it really came out of a lot of the efforts from our office here at Brandeis University. For those of you that are attending from far and away, we're located in Waltham, Massachusetts, which is not far from Boston, but if you're in Boston, it's the boonies. And our office is called Brandeis Innovation, and we house the Office of Technology Licensing that commercializes the research that comes out of our university. And we also have an innovation center where we run all of our programming for students, faculty, and staff in a range of different areas. And all the folks that are joining us today are part of our bigger network, and we look forward to including you in our network going forward. And I'm now going to introduce David, who will introduce the panel, and I will be taking myself off my webcam.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for our panel entitled How to Rise Above the Downturn. Over the next hour, we'll examine how the world has changed recently through the lens of hiring PhD graduates and discuss what skills are critical to succeed in postgraduate school and how you can leverage your current skills, plus what other skills you need to gain to start your career path on the right track. My name is David Waterman, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. I'm joined by 3 stellar PhDs in various stages of their career who are all excited to share with you their insights for succeeding today and in the future. Before I introduce our panel, allow me to provide a brief overview for how this is going to work. After a brief introduction, I will lead the panel in discussing their experience and outlooks for the current state of the job market for PhDs for about 30 to 40 minutes. We'll highlight specific skills you may already have and discuss what skills are needed today and how to go about getting them. After that, I'll take questions from the audience. Please type out your questions so that our assistants will provide them to me and I will feed them to our panelists in real time. Now, please allow me to introduce our panelists. First, we are joined today by Dr. Ilana Goldberg, AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the National Institute of Biomedical Engineering and Bioengineering. Before that, Dr. Goldberg was a project manager at AstraZeneca and has held numerous positions at the interface of biology and bioengineering. Thank you very much for being here today with us, Dr. Goldberg. Next is Dr. Nathan Cohen, CEO of Fractal Antenna Systems. Nathan has been working as a physicist and radio astronomer at the cutting edge of his field for nearly his entire career, accumulating over 50 patents, publishing over 100 articles, and has written several books as an expert and a thought leader in the field. Thank you very much for being here with us today, Dr. Cohen. The third member of our panel is Dr. Domenico Bollara, a quantitative systems pharmacologist at the Novartis Institute of Biomedical Research. Dr. Bollara is an expert in modeling the dynamic behavior of complex chemical and biological systems. Before joining NIRB, Dr. Bollara was a postdoc at Brandeis, and thanks a lot for coming back. We really appreciate you being here. So let's get right into it. To get started, I want to hear your stories of how this quarantine, these past 3 months, has affected your job. Specifically, how has it affected how you lead your team? What are you looking for now in hiring new candidates? What changes did you make, and how did you make them? And Dr. Bollara, we'll start with you since you were the last one to get introduced. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
So hi to everyone. Well, thanks for having me. It's really nice to come back to Brandeis, even in a virtual form. I would say that, so I've been recently hired at Novartis. I was a postdoc at Brandeis till the end of 2019. So when I started my job, it was very different from a postdoc. You know, was starting to enjoy the the office life, and it was nice. And then COVID-19 happened, right? And so essentially I only leave the office life for a little bit more than 1 month, and then everything changed. Everything changed at some point. So I'm a theorist. I do mathematical modeling for drug discovering, and at Novartis, everyone that, first of all, when the COVID-19 situation exploded, everyone was sent home and we were working from home, whoever could. And then gradually, people that had to go back to the office in a critical capacity, like lab people, essentially, they went back in a limited capacity, but everyone else stayed home, and I'm still working from home. And although neighbor is in Massachusetts, is in Cambridge. Right now, I'm working from Arizona. So what I found during this change is that essentially this problem was just, at least for me, it was an opportunity in disguise, because there is something that is very important when you do a job, which is work-life balance. And with stay home and work from home, this is completely thrown away. You have no physical restriction between your workplace and your your home, because you're working from home. So that makes working very, very difficult. At least it was in my case, and for a lot of people in my position. And so what I realized is that at some point I could use the fact that I had to stay home in a remote place. I like the outdoors, so I went in the middle, in between Arizona and Utah, between like three national parks, and that is great because I can still do my work. I've been very productive here, and still enjoy some form of outdoor life, and that greatly helped my productivity in general. And that was just one of the things that essentially one of the differences that was positive in my case. So I think that, I mean, I can talk a little bit more about other things, but
Yeah, let me
what
ask
I'm,
you a specific
yeah,
question. You know, what, since you did just come from a more academic track
yeah.
record, you know, what specifically were you able to leverage from your academic experience to now transition into this new world?
So this is very interesting. You know, when I read the title of this talk, this panel was going, around the downturn or something like that, and I really had a downturn at some point during my postdoc. I felt like I was even a very niche field with a very niche, like narrow expertise, which is mathematical modeling of nonlinear chemistry. Probably at Brandeis, people know Herb Epstein and so you know what I'm talking about. But outside of our small community, nonlinear chemistry is a dying field. Our main conferences got no more than 100 participants, so it's really tough. And at some point I was like, there is no academic position for me because I cannot compete with people that publish Nature and Science all the time because I am in a dying field, and I cannot, and I don't know how else I can use my main skill. And so what I did is that I looked around. I attended the ICOR project, and that gave me an idea of what was important outside the narrow limit of my field and academia, the way of thinking, etc., etc. And already at ICOR, the group that I was involved in, like the project leader, asked me to join the company in a capacity of co-founder. And then I started to work on that company, and after a couple of months, I joined another hack. So this is why I think it's important to do hacks. Whenever you see hacks, just go there. It's a good it's a good opportunity to test your skills on the field. So I joined a hackathon that Novartis specifically organized last year at their campus, and it was just a competition between 10 groups, and you had to choose a real project that they had there and get matched with other 4 people that were interested in that project and deliver a solution in 7 days.
So you
And
would
that
say
was
that
great.
you would say that that really helped to build your skills as
That
more
helped.
applicable generally than just the
That
PhD curriculum.
I would say that helped me understand what skills among the ones that I had were most valuable outside of academia, because the reality is that you have skills that you don't know that you have, or some of the skills that you have, you don't really value them that much.
Yeah.
And some of them might be like things that you see other people doing much better than you. So you never think, why are they going to hire me if they can hire the other guy next door?
And
And to
very
some extent,
quickly,
that's true. Yep.
before I move on to the next speaker, because we got to get everybody
Yeah.
in here, what specific skills were those that you were able to identify that were immediately
For
applicable?
me specifically, on a general notice, I would say the most important skill that you have is to think quantitatively and learn fast. These are the 2 most important skills that you can have. And specifically for my field, it was the ability to come up with mathematical models for chemical systems, which, if you think about that, drug discovery and and interactions with biology is a chemical system. So that was my specific skill.
Yeah, I agree that one of the things that we are taught in a PhD, specifically when things don't go well in the lab, which is most of the time, right, is how to be malleable, how to go with the flow, and how to pick up a new skill very, very quickly. So I think that we are very well prepared as PhDs and people with a PhD curriculum under their belt to be able to do that just across the board. So Dr. Goldberg, I'll throw it off to you, the same question. How has your life changed now, and what skills have you seen that are critical for transitioning in this phase?
So thanks so much, David. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here. Before I start with your question, I actually wanted to give a deeper history into my background because I think it's really important for understanding how you can transition careers, because I've transitioned a lot. I'm actually really excited to be here at Brandeis University. I did my undergraduate degree at Brandeis University. I graduated with dual major in chemistry and biochemistry, and all my undergraduate research was in the Petsko Ringe laboratory in protein crystallography. I'm not quite sure they're still doing research now. I know Professor Ringe retired, but that was my background. When I left Brandeis, I wanted a gap year before graduate school. So I did a Fulbright scholarship in Israel, and I was working on small molecule crystallography. And from there, I went into a crystal growth and design PhD at Georgetown University. I thought that when I went to grad school, I was going to work on solid state APIs, active pharmaceutical compounds, do solid state work on them, and go to career directly in pharmaceuticals. What happened was, as the newest PhD in the laboratory, my PI got a grant from DITRA, the Defense Research Organization, and they wanted us to look at the solid state properties of RDX and HMX, small molecule explosives. So my PhD ended up doing the exact same things I would have been doing if I'd been working on pharmaceuticals, but just for explosives. So that kind of changed my trajectory right there and then. So that's one of the things about being flexible. When I was in grad school, I realized I did not want the job of a professor. So I did a postdoc at a government laboratory, which was looking at explosives detection. So I leveraged the background I had in explosives. They were trying to look at new type of explosives formulations, figure out what their solid state properties were. Some of them weren't even solid state, but I could use the same techniques I learned in grad school to do that. And they were really excited to have someone that had actually seen an explosive before coming to the lab. I did that for about 1.5 years, and then I made a natural transition to the Applied Physics Laboratory, which is one big government contractor. So if you don't know, most of the basic research in the United States is funded by the DoD, the Department of Defense, and most of the time they use contractors. You are not a federal employee, you work for a contract lab, you work on contracts. And they were running a lot of contracts on explosives detection systems, doing test and evaluation of them, requirements documents, what requirements do you need for these systems to be in place in airports and air cargo environments. It was really, really interesting work. What I learned working as a contractor was when you are a contractor, you are never the one that makes the decisions. You are always working on the government, on the contracts based on what the government wants you to do. Now, sometimes you can have input back to your government sponsors and you can say, hey, as a scientist, because sometimes they're scientists, a lot of times they're not, you can say, hey, as a scientist on this, I think we should really go this way or try that. But you have to justify the time and money expense because the government is paying all the bills for these. And I decided that I wanted to, so I was there about 5 years. I started taking evaluation of my career and I thought, you know what? First of all, I want to be on the Fed side because I want to be part of the process that makes the decisions. And secondly, I want to go back to working in healthcare because originally when I went to get my PhD, I thought I would be working in the healthcare field. So I had to start networking because I had no idea how to do this. LinkedIn is your best networking friend. I sent a zillion of emails on LinkedIn. I reached out to people. Sometimes they were friends of friends. I didn't even know them. People were great. They got back to me. They gave me this whole network. And what happened was every third person I spoke to said, you really have to apply for this fellowship, this AAAS Science and Policy Fellowship. And so I did. But it's a year between when you apply for the fellowship and when you know that you got it. So in that between year time, I got a job as a contractor. I wasn't an AstraZeneca employee. I was a contractor there doing project management for their MSL field team. So if you don't know this, all pharmaceutical companies, or most of them, have medical science liaisons. Most of them are MDs or PhDs or PharmDs. And their job is to directly interface with doctors, discuss the science behind the medicines and understand why doctors would prescribe one medicine over another medicine. They're part of medical affairs, so they're not part of the commercial team. They're not supposed to be sales, but they're supposed to have peer-to-peer interactions. But I wasn't one of these people. I was on the back end, so I was helping manage the training of these MSLs. So that was a lot of personal skill trainings because most of their job involves talking to people and being able to talk in a fashionable way, but boiling down the science when you have to, ramping it up when you have to, understanding that. A lot of the documenting, so the FDA regulates. I have kids too, I'll get to that, if you can hear them in the background. So that the FDA regulates all these conversations and we have to document all of these conversations. So we have to have back-end computer programs, so building those up. And then I've been at AstraZeneca for about 7 months when I found out I got the fellowship and I thought, well, I've got to take it. I was able to get a job at NIH, which was exactly where I wanted to be in the healthcare field. And so getting to your COVID question, what happened was Congress has appropriated a lot of emergency funding to NIH to help battle COVID, and my institute actually got doubled in funding because of this. So I was there, I was learning the job, and because of the COVID money, I've actually gotten hired as a permanent employee. So it's helped me out that way.
So let me go back to one thing that you said, which was networking. So that networking was tremendously beneficial to you. How did you choose the people to reach out to? Did you choose them or did you just cast a wide net? How did you go about that?
So I started off with the network that I knew. So I knew some people that had been at APL that had left. I also looked through the type of fields I wanted to be in. So people that I saw that were in the pharmaceutical industry, sometimes they would, LinkedIn, you can see like if you have a connection. So I'd reach out to the person that was connected to them, even if I hadn't talked to that person in years, and say, hey, can you make me an introduction? A lot of times people did. And if you have an introduction email, it's easier to get a response. Sometimes it was just a cold email. Hey, I saw you on LinkedIn. I really want to learn more about your field and what skills are needed, because I knew I had to transition to learn different types of skills. And part of taking the fellowship was another way of doing that. I knew that to work in the government and be a Fed, I had to transition and understand government. So part of the fellowship was not only being placed in a government agency and learning those skills hands-on, but they also have seminars and tutorials. So that really helped me out.
Yeah, I think that right now is a fantastic time for networking, right? Because everybody's home, everybody's on their computer.
Yes.
And I kind of did the same thing when the shutdown first happened. And what inspired me was this podcast by, it's called The Happiness Lab by Dr. Santos
Yes.
from, yeah, it's a fantastic podcast. And what really amazed me was they did this study in it looking at what makes people happy. That's what the whole podcast is about. And one of the things that they identified was that people are actually happier when they go on a train and talk to someone versus not talk to someone at all. They walk off that train feeling a lot happier. And that got me thinking, especially at the beginning of the shutdown, where everything was just kind of surreal. Why don't I just reach out to all the people that I haven't talked to in a while and just drop them a line? And for me, that generated a few different leads, which then companies reached out to me to do some private consulting for them, these drug companies that are just starting up. So that opened up a great opportunity. And like I said, people being at home now, is everybody's on their computer. Everybody's kind of not so much as much anymore, but everybody's kind of starved for human to human contact. And I found people were very, very receptive to that. And then as I started doing that, people would also reach out to me too. And then I could help connect people with other people that I had just talked to. And so you always have to remember that networking isn't just you looking for a job, right? It's you looking to make a substantial connection with another person, which may end up in a job or could lead you down a road talking to other
Network
people.
is really, in my opinion, networking is actually not looking for a job, but it's understanding different types of jobs and what skills are needed for those jobs to see if, first of all, you think it might be a good fit for you. And second of all, if you think it might be, what skills are you missing that you need to somehow figure out how to get?
Yeah, that's a great point. So
in terms of,
you go ahead and finish your thought.
Just in terms of skills that you already have as a PhD that can help you out in the jobs, first of all, everybody needs project managers. And if you have ever designed experiments, set up a timetable for when you're going to do experiments, make sure you have the instrumentations, the resources, the supplies available to do them when you want to, you've been a project manager. And that's an important skill you have. Another really big skill that is very, very important these days is science communication. Every NIH institute has a science communication office. They hire PhDs into them. If you want to communicate science, if you have the ability to take complex scientific topics and boil them down easily into understandable by the public, you're needed, you're wanted. So those are two big skills that I think a lot of PhDs have, because of course we have to plan projects and experiments, and we have to communicate our science to a variety of different people, some in our field, some in not. And if those things interest you and you like doing those things, start looking for outlets in that area. They're big in hiring right now.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Nathan, I want to change the question a little bit from you to get your CEO level view of what's going on now. First of all, have you done any hiring over the past 3 months? And how has this changed what you're looking for in people? Or has it changed what you're looking for? You're muted. Hang on. Still muted. Could we unmute him? You're still muted.
Nate, I'm unmuting you right now. Hang on, and you will be able to speak in just one moment. You're actually unmuted right now.
Hey, I'm live. Well, I think Drs. Goldberg and Ballar have given you a very valuable perspective. I'm going to try to give you a sense of the other side, which is how does management look at the situation, and especially in a small company, what does that look like, and what kind of skills would management be looking for PhDs? So I'd like to emphasize the following. People think that small companies are less important, for example, in big companies. What really happens in small companies is that you see things more directly. You have to deal with them decisively, and you have to anticipate long ahead of time. There's no inertia or buffers that normally happen in a larger company. So it's always amusing to me when some people think that a small company, for example, doesn't really think as astutely as a large one. It's quite the opposite. What we've seen is that large institutions, especially government institutions and large companies, really have to be the pill balls that have to be pushed up the hill. So, for example, on my staff, I have a couple of folks who worked at Bain, people who are strategic consultants, normally work with large companies. They're working with us because they feel this is what we're doing is cutting edge, and it's moving forward in a very positive fashion. Having said that, there's no sugarcoating the last 3 or 4 months. I've been through several of these goat rodeos before, one in the early 80s, 87, the 90s, of course, the end of the 90s, then 2008 and so on. They're devastating. And we want everyone to succeed. Everyone here attending these seminars has valuable skills. Don't underestimate that. But the reality is that the world is crazy right now, and there's oftentimes a lot that you can't do about it. And your self-esteem has to be defined by you. It shouldn't be defined by the craziness of the outside world. So, in other words, thinking positively is valuable because it allows you to move ahead and have a plan and try to implement the plan. But you shouldn't assume, as Dr. Goldberg's pointed out, that the plan is always going to be working out exactly as you'd like. And you have to be willing to take baby steps horizontally rather than vertically, and to get yourself in better shape. So the situation here is we're not doing hiring. It's quite the opposite. A number of companies are closing. They depend on purchase orders from their customers, and their customers have pulled back, and it becomes a game of musical chairs to see who's going to get stuck. And oftentimes it's small companies or the smaller contractors that have to pay that price. Now, fortunately, we're not at that stage, but unfortunately, it has made it so that right now, we're not going to be doing any hiring. And basically, the problem is that people right now don't want to hire ahead. They want to hire when they need people. That has not been this perspective in the last 3 or 4 years. People have oftentimes wanted to hire ahead because they felt that it gave them an edge moving forward. It's quite the opposite. Right now, hiring depends on having the revenues coming in or knowing they're going to come in.
But Dr. Cohen, theoretically, if you were to do some hiring now, what would you look for differently now than maybe you wouldn't have paid any mind to that before?
Hiring, at least in a small company, depends on exactly what skills you need to match the revenue coming in. Now, from a PhD standpoint, that means things like ability to do optimization, and Dr. Ballar is an excellent example of that. Ability to do project management, as Dr. Goldberg has pointed out. And more importantly, the ability to take new ideas and to synthesize them with a number of other ideas. Multidisciplinary attacks, at least in technology companies, are the way new technologies are vetted and founded and worked through. So what I'm looking for, will be looking for when this new revenue stream comes in, and that probably will be in the next 4 to 6 months, is individuals who are fast on their feet, that have self-confidence and are willing to attack problems and take risks. If you fail, so what? I mean, that's what technology is all about. For every successful technology, there's probably 10 that have failed in the process. No one is going to treat you lesser because something didn't work out. You have to play hunches. You have to be willing to move forward. You have to be willing to take risks.
Yeah, great. Now playing off that, this is kind of a toss up for the group, and whoever wants to take it, go ahead. What, I guess, we talked about project management a lot, right? And project management has totally shifted, at least in my experience. I was very used to doing personalized project management in front of another person. And I find that now doing it remotely, it's totally different. I have to schedule my time much more wisely because time is scheduled in blocks now, whereas before, whether it was in the lab or whether it was for the recycling company that I run, it was much more in person and kind of on the whim. But now everything is very scheduled, and I find that I have to check in with people much more frequently.
You bet.
And
So Dave, what you're really talking about there is discipline. And I can tell you right now, people who've invested years getting a PhD, it's built in. In fact, it's such an autonomic level that you don't realize that you have the discipline that a lot of other people don't. So you're just executing what you've learned through the years, Dave, and you're absolutely right, doing project management remotely. And we are doing some of that is a lot more challenging because the communication has to be better, miscommunications happen, and everyone has to make sure the timelines are met. So being friendly, not micromanaging, but being on top of everything you're right, a lot more important when you do it remotely. That's what we're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else on the panel have anything to add on?
Absolutely everything that was said, but also being willing to reach out to people, right? A lot of times when you're in person, you can run into somebody's office and say, hey, quick question, do you have this? And understanding how to communicate with people in a different way. So I can't run to somebody's office, but I can IM them and say, hey, do you have a second? And try to have those personal connections. I find making the personal connections when you're project managing is so important, and spending time listening to your team so that you know what they're thinking and what's really going on down on the ground, and using different methods. So sometimes it's video chat, sometimes it's IM, sometimes it's a personal phone call, sometimes it's a whole group call. But understanding that you have all those different avenues and leveraging all those different avenues for communication, which is sometimes a lot harder than just stopping by somebody's office or walking into the lab and saying, how's it going?
Yeah. And I think that this is a skill that it's a learned skill, right? We're only having to deal with it now. And this is a skill that current PhD students can get, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can manage your project remotely, let's say you have an undergrad that works for you, and maybe your undergrad is doing a data science project on the side. This is the experience that I have now. In the lab, I have 2 undergrads that work for me, and they're both doing 2 data science projects. I don't know anything about coding, so I just kind of provide ideas and guidance for them. But you have to, that's a good experience to gain, is how do you manage people remotely? And that's definitely something that, that PhDs can do now.
And David, there was something else you brought up there. You're managing projects where you might not be the expert in the field or the person that can actually get down on the ground and do the work. And that's okay. That's another skill you have to develop, is how to be able to guide people. And that involves a lot of listening. So you can guide people in a technical expert, manage a project in a technical field that you might not be an expert in. Because when you come out of your PhD, you are an expert, but you're an expert in one field. And you can go broad and do project management even if you're not that expert. And that's another skill to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, is there anybody else want to chime in before we move on to one last topic before we open it up for questions? Okay, so finally, go ahead.
I would say that yeah, I definitely agree with what Dr. Goldberg and Dr. Cohen said, especially that idea of building some form of interpersonal relationship in this time in your workplace. It's really, really important. And so one trick, I think that what Dr. Goldberg said, it's really true, like taking that time. It's very important, and a trick that you can do is whenever you have a meeting that is for some particular project, or to talk about work or science, maybe account for like 10 minutes more and ask how they're doing. Just that simple interpersonal question builds a lot of good vibe, and also a lot of good energy. Also, it's essentially a networking skill, and that's a small trick that you can do every time you have the chance to talk with anyone.
Yeah, in my experience, those are the best managers that always ask, how you're doing, know something personal about you. It's getting harder and harder as we get more and more remote, but now is the time to really reinforce that. Okay, so kind of playing off that a little bit and moving from the skills that people have as a PhD, which they can directly apply to a job. In your opinion, maybe we'll do this one just very quickly because I want to get to the questions. What, in your opinion, are skills that people can look into and develop now that will set them up for success immediately when they land the job? Something global. Like we talked about project management, I think that's a great one. Are there anything else that come to mind?
Communicational skills and personal skills, exactly what Dr. Bolero was just talking about. Really, I think the buzzword now is emotional intelligence, but really being able to be in tune with other people matters. Caring about other people matters, especially as a PhD. You're probably going to be hired into positions where either you're directly working with other people constantly or expected to manage other people. And that's what's important, is those emotional intelligence skills and really caring about everybody on your team, and understanding their backgrounds, where they come from, and using that to best leverage your workload and your team and your colleagues.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I have
I would.
an idea on that. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Dominica.
No, please go ahead, Nate.
I think there's another subtlety here that we're missing, and that is the scope of knowledge that you acquire as you're doing a thesis is extensive. The point is that if you're doing innovation, you're often looking into things that are not directly along the same line of what you've been doing before. That means finding out about other fields, about other aspects of other fields, of the jargon, of the processes, of all those other things that other people use. So the ability of PhDs to go and be able to explore that and then be able to translate it is incredibly important. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with both PhDs and with graduate students when I've explored new fields which have led to new technologies, or I said, I don't know anything about this. I think we need to know something about this. Go read up on this and come back 2 weeks from now. Tell me what the big issues are. Tell me what the unsolved problems are. Tell me what they think the processes are. And we're going to look at this afresh and see how it applies to what we're trying to do. So that ability to be able to investigate knowledge that's not necessarily the background you already have is incredibly important in innovation, and it's certainly a skill that I look for in considering candidates.
Right. Domenico?
And I would say for me, I would like to give probably between 2 and 3 practical advice that I noticed, at least in my line of work and my field, are very important. First of all, I think that the first one is a general one that is important everywhere. It correlates with that communication, but whether Dr. Goldberg very, very importantly said, work on your emotional intelligence and communication. I would also say that communication is also, it's also important to work in communication in terms of effectiveness, especially when you write a mail for someone, like to ask networking or something like that, and when you write your CV or your resume. There is a good way to write a resume and there is a bad way to write a resume, and there is also a good way to write a mail and there is a bad way to write mail. And the thing is that you don't have to improvise this. You can go and look on personal development courses, and they teach you every single trick in the book. So that's something that you can do. Look into personal development courses. Secondly, more specifically, if you are a technical PhD that does any computation, let me put it this way. When I attended the hackathon, which was essentially the gateway to my job, I was hired because I attended that event. I didn't even have to apply for the job. I attended that event. They told me, we are looking for someone like you. We saw you working. Here's come for a round of interview. That's how it went. So this is how important it is to go to events. But when I attended that event, out of 10 hacks, out of 10 projects, 9 of them revolved in some way, shape, or form around artificial intelligence and machine learning. Whatever you are, if you are a linguist, if you are a chemist, a physicist, it doesn't matter what you are. Chances are that at some point, if you know how to code and you are hired in a technical capacity, someone will ask you, can you do machine learning? Can we do a machine learning algorithm there? So I would say that even if it's not your main thing, if you have time to learn the basics of that, either to talk with people that do machine learning or to do some yourself, that's something that it's a practical skill that I advise to anyone who is in a technical capacity.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. All right, now let's get into the questions. And I think playing off what Dr. Bolera just said, this is a good one. This is from Hoda. Do you think product slash project managing certificates can help? Are there any concrete suggestions for this? So I think she means going out and getting an online certificate for project management. Does that help make you a better qualified candidate if you're going into a more project-oriented field, or even just as a starting candidate in any job?
So I have looked into getting the PMP certification. I don't have one. What I found is on-the-job experience is what matters. There are some jobs out there that require the PMP to be hired into the project management role, but I haven't found that to be limiting. On the other hand, it can only help add to your credentials.
Yeah, do you feel as though? Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, my feeling on that is, project management is valuable, but it's not rocket science. It's not difficult to learn it. If you're an English major and not a PhD in the sciences or technology, chances are getting that certificate is going to show that you have honed and acquired that skill. But frankly, anyone who's done a thesis has done project management to start with. And going in and taking the course yourself or reading up on it and getting some books and doing it that way, I mean, you're going to get 90% of what you need to know in about 10 or 15 hours, in my opinion. So would I expect someone to have that certificate as a PhD? No, I don't. I think it's a waste of your time, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I'd echo what you say, Dr. Cohen, which is that I think experience far outweighs a certificate. And so if you can convince someone that you have substantial project management experience from your PhD, even if it's not in a project managing role in a company, I think that goes a long way. Okay, so our next question is from Yao. What are some good concrete first steps if you are completely new to finding a job? What are the first steps that you would suggest one does coming out at there? Maybe they're just starting to write their thesis, starting to get on the market. Go ahead.
So I would be happy to take on that question because I'm very fresh. I did that a few months ago. So just to give you, I think that, I don't know, I hope that I am like a beacon of hope here because I was in a desperate position. So if I could make it, like I think that a lot of people here can. I really had no idea what to do outside of academia, like zero idea. I entered academia with the idea of going to academia. I followed a pretty academic path. All the models and works that I did were conceptual modeling of some sort, nothing applied. So I was in that position. What do? I didn't even have a LinkedIn profile. I had no idea. So starting from zero, and I was in a postdoc position. Actually, PhD students, they have more resources. Undergrads, even more. But postdocs, not a lot. So a few practical things. First of all, you are enrolled in a university. Look into probably all the boring email that your university office is giving to you that you don't read because you don't. Read them. There is going to be something. There is going to be some summer school. There is going to be some hackathon. There is going to be some project. I didn't want to do a startup, I enrolled in the I-Corps. That was like a fantastic experience that gave me so much knowledge. So look for opportunities to actually get out there, and see what's going on. And your academic institution is providing those opportunities. So just look what is available. Secondly is don't be like, go to networking events. Don't be afraid to just show up and talk to people. That's an important thing. More than writing letters, I mean, now it's a little bit difficult, but there are online networking events, and there are online conferences and stuff. Just go with the mindset of understanding what is there rather than proposing something that you don't even know what. So always go with the understanding of what's out there, and then it will more or less fall naturally. And another first step is take time to rewrite your CV in a effective way. A recipe that my future manager actually gave to me when I was applying for that job, because he really wanted me to have that. So he also gave me tips on how to write my CV. And a very simple recipe is like, when we write our CV in academia, we always say, oh, I've been studying whatever the effect of this compound in this system, and it tells absolutely nothing. So the way that you have to write a CV for outside of academia is in 3 points. I solved this problem, comma, by doing this, comma, which led to this impact. For example, if I worked on, I don't know, the effect of whatever, a stereoisomer of a drug in the kinetics of tumor growth, you don't say I worked on that. You say I solved. I helped solving. I helped understanding the kinetics of tumor growth with this drug, so people know what you're doing, by making a theoretical model which led to a publication in this journal. This is a simple recipe that you can always apply, and it's very, very good. So
Yeah.
rewrite your CV if you have time.
I think another great idea is to rewrite your CV and then send it to people within your network just to take a look at it. You know, somebody that's a manager, and say,
Yes.
how does this look? And that also goes back to one of the central themes of this, which is just networking, right? Be in communication with these people, because you never know what you're going to find. If you shop your resume around saying, hey, I'm not applying for anything right now, but would you just take a look at it? That person could say, huh, I was just talking to a guy the other day that's looking for people with those skills. Let me put you into contact with them.
Let me draw a distinction here that I think is very important. Certainly in academia and in nonprofit research institutions, a CV is the way to go. But a CV is not the same thing as a resume, okay? A resume incorporates the same information, but it organizes it in a way that's more readily apparent to, for example, HR, human resources, and the people who are looking to do the hiring. They want to match what they're looking for with what your skill set and knowledge set is. So they don't want to go down 5 pages, looking through conferences that you went to and presented, or papers, et cetera, et cetera. They want to know, what do you have that we need? And you wouldn't necessarily organize a CV in quite that way. You're not being dishonest by reorganizing it so that the things they're looking for are up front. That's the name of the game. But that's the distinction between a resume and a CV. And also, in a resume where you've been using, for example, for the most part in applying to commercial companies, if you give me a 5 or 10 page resume, I'm not interested. I want to see a 2 pages maximum that really hit me in the face with what you have available.
Yeah.
Right, and just to add to that point, there are several ways you can organize a resume. A lot of times we always think we have to organize it chronologically in what you did, but if the skill set for the job you're applying to is not at the top of your resume, it might not be looked at. So you can put your chronological work experience at the bottom and organize into sections of different skill type experiences. And that's something you can look up on the internet very easily, different ways of organizing resumes, and you might have to have several versions of your resume depending on what you're applying to.
Yeah.
You, especially if you're applying online to an automated resume reviewer, you really want to make sure that the keywords that are in the job description are in your resume. So if the job description says nuclear magnetic resonance and you write NMR, that is not the same thing. Which these are small things, but they're looked at with the trackers, especially if you're applying for federal jobs. They go through HR trackers first, and HR does not understand the technical things. They just match what the job description says to what your resume says. But the other important thing is that network. So like Dr. Bolera said, he had somebody on the inside that wanted to hire him first. That helped push his resume through. So it's developing that network, and really, it's okay to go and tell people, tell me about what you do. I'm really interested in what you do. People like talking about themselves and what they do, and that's how you learn more. Going open and minded and just asking those open-ended questions to hear really what people are doing and what their skill sets are that are needed for the jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is a quick hitter question, but I'm happy to hear from all of you. And I will start off with an answer to this one. At what stage during your PhD should you start looking for a job? Ideally, it would be before you join your PhD, but I know people that had a job locked up 3 years before they graduated. I know people that had a job locked up just in time. And I know people who had to stay on a little bit longer after they defended their PhD to find a job because they were still trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And I think all three scenarios are fine, but it's best if you start as early as possible, because one trap that you want to avoid is having to settle for a job. And the earlier you start looking for a job, theoretically, the more options you will have. And then you can really put, and that goes for jobs in academia, like postdoc positions. You should start looking for a postdoc very early and try a lot of different labs, but also in industry positions or anywhere else in the world. The earlier you start, the better. It also, I can see a direct correlation between the earlier a person gets a job and their general happiness through their PhD, right? If you have something to look forward to, have this idea of getting out already, then you might be a happier worker that way. So I'd love to hear anybody else's input on that as well.
Well, in my opinion, you shouldn't start looking for a job until your thesis looks like it's heading in the right direction, because the real ambiguity that happens is how long is it going to take before you complete your thesis, and things can go wrong that way. So if you feel that you're making good progress and you have a pretty good idea when you're going to finish up, that's when I would start looking for a job. So what is that period? Could be, I don't know, as much as 2 years before you finish the thesis. But you need to have some confidence in talking to people about how your project is going and when it's going to be completed. That's what I would want to know.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Okay, here's a question for Dr. Goldberg and Dr. Bollara. What are the extra skills an organic synthetic chemist should have to get a job in pharma? So outside of just being a synthesis junkie, I take it.
Well, what type of career are you looking for? If you're looking to get away from the bench, the project management skills are great, because as an organic synthetic chemist, you have to understand roles and processes and how to put them all together to make them work. Science communication, how to talk to people, how to communicate science. People hear organic chemistry and they clam up and they don't want to hear anymore. Do you want to be that outward facing person that can describe how a drug works without using terms that make people not want to listen anymore? That's important, especially to pharma companies.
Let me parlay that into another question as well, which pairs in very nicely, which is, how can I convince my advisor to provide me with space to develop these new skills? The advisors always want you to churn out that research. Not all of them, but most of them. So how do you go about having that conversation with an advisor that just wants you to work at the bench?
So a lot of times it depends on your relationship with the advisor, but really it's what can you do for your advisor? So going out there and going to conferences, doing talks helps your advisor get prestige. So if you couch it in that, hey, can I advertise the great work that you're doing that's coming out of the project that you've let me work on in your lab and go talk about it at this conference? That's great. Find a conference that's maybe slightly outside a straight organic synthesis conference and pitch to the advisor why it would be good for them. A lot of skills that are very underrated is grant writing and grant funding. So every academic PI needs to write grants to keep their lab funded. Can you help with that? Can you talk to your PI and say, hey, can I help write part of your next grant application? Because having those skills, being able to teach people those skills, first of all, that's science communication. And second of all, there's a whole area of expertise in grant writing to keep labs funded. Volunteering to help your PI with stuff that is part of their job that they might not want to do. So a lot of PIs get invited to way more conferences and talks than they can go to. Can you volunteer to take that off their hands? Can you volunteer to mentor an undergrad, which is another way of getting project management skills, management skills. When I was first out of grad school, on my resume, I said mentored 3 undergrads. So that was mentoring, that was managing people. That showed a lot. But you have to always couch it in how can you help your advisor and how will you help your advisor gain prestige in a way in which you're also developing these skills for you.
And I would say that I completely agree with Dr. Goldberg. These are really good advice. I would say, just to add something to that, it's interesting because I'm not a bench chemist, right? I am a theorist. So I would say that I know what I look for in a bench chemist because I have to talk with them. So I can tell you what, from my point of view, it's important in a bench chemist, and it's the ability to talk with someone like me, just like I have to have the ability to talk with someone like a bench chemist. And that's something that Dr. Goldberg said, it's the ability to communicate. I cannot stress it like too much, like teamwork and communication is key when you go outside of academia. There are tight deadlines. You won't be able to do it yourself, like full stop. There is no amount of academic genius that will get you through going through a tight deadline alone. That's not happening. You have to rely on people. And so I would say develop the ability. I know that this might sound bad, but develop the ability to use people like tools, in the sense that you use a computer to make faster calculation. You are going to quote unquote use a pharmacologist or a theorist like me. So if you get into that ability of essentially seeing your coworkers as valuable assets to your work, then you will also need, just like you need to learn how to code, to communicate, to use a computer, you need to learn how to speak to someone that has a different background. So
Yeah, and
that
I think
is
I think a
definitely,
great way, I got to cut you off because we're almost out of time.
yeah.
I think a great way to do that is by starting collaborations, either within your
Yeah.
department, within your building, within your university, or international collaborations, domestic collaborations, because that does
And
exactly what you said.
And
Yeah,
very quickly, one thing that I wanted to add about the second question is, there is something, so, sometimes people say dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. This is also a valuable lesson here. Sometimes if you go to depending the relationship you have with your PhD advisor, right? But if you go to them and say, hey, maybe I could do this, I would like to do that, do you think it's okay if I do this? They will just see like they have to give permission to something that is a mystery for them. They don't know how you will behave there. They don't know your productivity. It's a mess. So chances are you're going to get a no if your PhD advisor is not open-minded. Go to your PhD advisor already with the next step, with the proposition. Say, hey, I heard that there is that. I think I have this idea. So propose ideas directly. And then
okay,
see
so
what comes
very
out.
quickly, to wrap it up, Nathan, this is for you. How can someone that is interested in entrepreneurship or the startup life, what is some advice very quickly, because we got to wrap it up, on getting interested in getting some experience in that area? You're muted.
You've already worked for a thesis advisor. So the bottom line is if you want to acquire skills quickly, you have to learn from a mentor. And that means you have to work with someone who's already been through it and convince them that you add value to what they're doing. Now, that may mean in particular that you're a consultant assisting them. That's probably the easiest path to do it. But frankly, just going out there and doing it, you don't want to take those whacks to begin with. You want someone to say, don't do that for the following reason, or don't talk to so-and-so for the following reason, or do this instead. It isn't always logical about what the right things are to do, but there's unwritten processes in entrepreneurship that you can't learn from getting a degree from Harvard Business School, for example. So I think that the easiest thing to do is try to consult for someone who's already successfully been down those paths.
Great. All right, so our time is through. Thank you all very much for being here. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. And I think we're just going to wrap up with a follow-up from the Office of Technology Licensing. This is true. And if I couldn't get to your question, I am very sorry, but we're out of time.
Thanks everybody for that great session. So really great insights. So for folks who either you had a question and you didn't get around to asking it, or you just want to stay connected with us, I want to call your attention to the chat. You can sign up to receive emails from us. We obviously have your email, and we are going to follow up with you with the rest of the sessions in this series. But if you want to stay in touch beyond that, we promise we won't spam you, because you're obviously not Brandeis attendees for the most part. So if you want to stay in touch, we have funding opportunities and other ways for you to build your career, different opportunities, for instance, to join startup accelerators, and all of those are available within our emails, as well as if you follow us on social media. So if you are looking to find out more about how to build your career as an entrepreneur, we have another session coming up on the 15th from 5 to 6, again, called Complementary Collaboration, helping you figure out how to collaborate across disciplines. July 22nd, Teamwork Makes the Dream Work, where you can learn how to be a team member. And on July 29th, Finding Mentors, Allies, and Experts. And you will receive an email on how to sign up for all of those. The next session, Complementary Collaboration, is also going to talk about how it's primarily going to focus on how to build academia and corporate partnerships. And then Teamwork Makes the Dream Work will focus more on the interdisciplinary aspects. So the two events dovetail nicely together. Highly recommend that you attend either one of those, and don't worry about getting a link. We will send that out to you. And again, a friendly reminder, go to hackmyphd.com or hackmyphd.org to sign up. And for security reasons, you will then receive another email with the link to go to webinar. So please watch out for that. Any final thoughts from the panel?
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great experience, and happy to be back at Brandeis.
I would say thank you a lot. I would just like to leave everyone with a sentence that I really like. Sometimes it's good to think of problems and opportunities in disguise. So
Keep the self-esteem up. Don't let the world define it for you.
Great words of wisdom from all of our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who attended. And please watch for an email with registration information. We really hope to see you at our next event. Have a wonderful evening. Good luck with all of your endeavors, and see you next week, we hope. Thank you to our wonderful panel and to David, our marvelous moderator. Take care. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Stay safe. Stay well. Bye-bye.
bye.